shouldn't be seen as having implications for receiving a report yesterday on the...
In a sometimes emotional speech, the retiring Attorney-General John Dowd opened the third and final stage of the courthouse restoration. The building, which was erected in 1897, has had its past preserved and some of its facilities upgraded. The improvements include access for the handicapped and better security. Ironically, as the Maitland Courthouse has been given a new lease of life, the Attorney-General's political career draws to a close. He confessed to a special interest in courthouses.
Buildings reflect the attitudes of the people and the law. And the 19th century shows the harsh colonial beginnings, the very rough justice that was there to a very euphoric era in the lead up to Federation, and this is probably the best example of that in addition of this particular architect, Walter Liberty Vernon.
After the gold rush, the Public Works Department spent too much money on courthouses. An inquiry was ordered and spending curbed. The Maitland Courthouse marks the end of an era. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Today, the Westpac Bank threw cold water on all of that. It says there are no signs of an economic recovery later this year, despite yesterday's improved balance of payments figures. The bank says that companies which have reported for the first half of this financial year are saying their profits are down between 30% and 40%, and the bank expects the trend to continue for the second half of the year.
2,000 Federated Ironworkers at BHP voted to pursue the provisions of Accord Mark 6, seeking the $12 increase with superannuation and productivity payments recently hammered out between waterfront workers and employers at the national level. The New South Wales Labor Council intends to push the accord when the state wages case begins tomorrow. Unions have rejected the 2.5% national wages decision reached by the Industrial Relations Commission, and while the state wages case won't necessarily rubber stamp that decision, FIA Branch Secretary Maury Rudd admits that by pushing for the accord, the union leaves little room for negotiation.
If we can't get common sense out of BHP and the Industrial Commission, our members would be certainly embarking on an industrial campaign of one nature or another. It may be rolling strikes, it may be 24-hour strikes, who knows. Heaven hopes we don't get to that stage.
BHP intends to abide by the Commission's decision, but can't comment until that decision is reached. However, a spokesman said the company applauded the ironworkers' willingness to continue with award restructuring. Meanwhile, Maury Rudd concedes that the threat of industrial action hanging over the outcome of the wages case won't do anything to help Labor's chances at the forthcoming state elections.
What do? Do we just sit back every time there's an election on and say, well, we're not going to do anything? We as unions have to look after the rights of our members. We are also a political arm of the ALP, but it doesn't matter. We still have to look after our members.
Police patrolling Derby Street arrested a man at gunpoint just before midday, less than a kilometre from the scene of a bank robbery at the Junction shopping centre. The arrest was over in seconds in front of dozens of astonished onlookers.
The first thing I seen was the police van pulling up outside of the shop and one constable giving chase on foot around the corner of the shop and closely followed by the second officer. When I stepped outside the shop and looked around, they had him tackled in the middle of the street and guns were drawn and they were frisking him down.
Believing the man may have been armed, police were taking no chances. The street drama followed reports of an armed hold-up at the National Australia Bank in the Junction at about 11:45. Bank staff told police a man burst into the building brandishing what appeared to be a pistol. He fled on foot with a large quantity of cash. Police say the speed of the arrest was partly due to the coolness of bank staff who were able to give police a good description of the gunman, which was then circulated to patrolling cars within minutes of the robbery. Moments later, police on Derby Street spotted a man matching that description.
He took off the minute he saw us and down the road there, and I called on him to stop and he hit the ground straight away.
During the arrest, police recovered a quantity of cash apparently stuffed under the man's shirt. He was taken to Newcastle Police Station for further questioning by the armed hold-up squad. In the meantime, a search is continuing for a handgun which police believe may have been thrown into a stormwater drain in the Junction area. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
On a clear morning you can see for kilometres, but this was anything but a clear morning. Newcastle awoke under a thick blanket of smog, but according to the State Pollution Control Commission, there was nothing to fear. It said the haze was merely white fog. And it may well be impossible to prove the Commission wrong, simply because it doesn't test smog levels in Newcastle. The air pollution monitoring that's done daily in Sydney was shelved here several years ago. Despite the presence of so much heavy industry, the SPCC believes the problem never gets bad enough to be worth the effort. BHP does some monitoring to ensure its chemical discharge doesn't exceed its SPCC licence, and the City Council checks dust accumulation at several sites throughout the city about once a month. No one checks the quality of the air we breathe. NBN weather expert Nat Jeffrey says recent weather patterns made a build-up of pollution inevitable.
The combination of both the high pressure system and also that temperature inversion, so it looked a little worse than it has been, plus the fact that we've had some bushfires around over the last few days and a lot of that smoke's still hanging about. It's been hanging about for days. I've no doubt in fact that pollution levels in this particular region would have been as high as Sydney's over the last couple of days.
But could it have just been fog after all?
Fog is cloud. Fog is not photochemical pollution. What we had in the atmosphere this morning was orange. I've never seen any orange fog before.
Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.
These children are being immunised against hepatitis B. Unlike other Australian children, they're not born with any inherited immunity to the diseases that were unknown in this country before the arrival of white settlers. The Aboriginal community is more vulnerable than most to hepatitis B.
It's a long-term illness and I think it could be prevented if the children were immunised at an early age, like from newborn babies.
The clinics were funded by the Aboriginal Health Resource Commission and run on a shoestring. 2 health workers have travelled to 10 centres throughout the Upper and Lower Hunter and have relied heavily on word of mouth to spread the word that the clinic was coming to town.
The support that we got from the community to start this, look, it was, I can't express the thanks to those people that really helped us.
It's been a very successful year with over 1,000 children vaccinated. Not only are the treatments valuable in preventing the disease, they've also helped increase awareness of the importance of immunisation.
While the skies above Newcastle remained a steely grey, the politicians were turning green. In the wake of yesterday's smog problems, the ALP's Bryce Gaudry was calling for more stringent pollution monitoring.
The industry is now paying, but it's monitoring its own output. I think it's very important that the public have that monitoring process funded by industry.
But the government also came out fighting from the green corner. Environment Minister Tim Moore countered the Labor challenge with a double-barrelled response. He pointed out that air quality testing of the kind done daily in Sydney was abolished in Newcastle in 1982, when the ALP was in government. He also revealed plans to almost double the local staffing levels at the SPCC if and when it becomes the Environmental Protection Agency. If the government is re-elected, the EPA's Newcastle office will be assigned 21 permanent staff, as compared with the 12 currently working for the SPCC, and extra inspectors will be stationed at Singleton and the Central Coast. Mr Moore says the extra manpower will allow far more extensive air quality testing, a move welcomed by local medical researchers.
I think the more information we get in this area, the better. We've been very short of information over the last 10, 20 years, and times are changing, and I think we're all pleased to see the upgrading of the SPCC and the increased activity in terms of getting information as to just what the environment in our town is like.
The government has also invited environmental groups from Newcastle and Wollongong to take part in the Griner Smog Summit, scheduled for mid-June.
I'm calling public forums and things of this nature, it's very cheap to do, and I think it is a cheap political trick in that sense.
Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.
Minister, Mr Ozaki, my parliamentary colleague Bob Roberts. There was a predecessor of mine who should be nameless about 2 back.
Newcastle detectives and members of the tax department claim to have uncovered an elaborate fraud operated by an employee of the Newcastle Tax Office. It's alleged that over the past 2 years, 29-year-old Darren James Poyner collected $150,000 in tax returns from about 40 fraudulent income tax submissions. Police claim that Poyner's hunt for bogus identities took him to the local library where he consulted the births, deaths and marriages columns. Once he found a name that he liked, he would go to the local registry and get a copy of the birth certificate. It's further alleged that Poynter used stolen group certificates and tax file numbers to give his non-existent characters fake employers paying fake wages. He then filled out the standard tax returns and waited for the rebates. It's alleged that Poynter had access to tax department computers and was able to doctor the final payment checks in order to deposit them in his own bank account. Poynter and a female co-worker were arrested yesterday. Police confiscated a number of tax department files and equipment when they raided the rented home they shared at Adamstown Heights. Police also confiscated furniture in the house and seized bank assets totalling $10,000. Poynter was refused bail and will reappear at Newcastle Court on May 24. A 23-year-old co-worker was previously bailed to appear at a later date.
Power appeared before the Newcastle League judiciary after officials had viewed videotape of the incident that left Reid with a shattered jaw. The meeting began last night at 5:30 and after lengthy debate by all parties, the judiciary was moved in its entirety to the newsroom of NBN, where the television station's tape of the match could be viewed on the high-quality editing machines. However, on the resumption of the hearing back at the Leagues Club, it was decided that South's front rower Michael Varnum would be an important witness in the case, and the hearing has been adjourned until 5:30 on Monday afternoon. Also up in the air today was a young Novocastrian who has just been chosen to represent her country at the World Hang Gliding Championships during July in Austria. Helen Ross-Smith has been named as a member of the 10-person team, along with another Newcastle lass, Sonia Woolridge, and the titles signify a breakthrough in the sport for the girls.
I'm the first lady actually to gain full commercial sponsorship, which is really a big inroad for the sport. My company, Energon, is a vitamin company, and to gain commercial sponsorship at that level is fantastic.
Helen is training hard for the World Championships, knowing that the conditions in Europe will be vastly different.
Well, in Austria you're taking off at high altitude, 6,000 feet minimum, so you're flying at much higher altitudes than here on the coast.
And at Lawn Park today, personal milestones for two people on opposite sides of the whistle. Maitland's president, Grant Marnie, became his club's first player to notch 300 games, and he was chaired off by his beloved reserve grade side. In his career, he has played 219 matches in the twos, and he's won 5 flags. Also today, referee Sandy McNeil officiated in his 300th game in the Newcastle Rugby Union. Sandy has had a distinguished career refereeing at Cardiff Arms Park in Wales and in 8 test matches, and is on the shortlist to get a Guernsey to this year's World Cup. Well done, Sandy and Grant. It's a match the pumpkin pickers deserve to win. Play seesawed until Frank Lawler potted a smart field goal and the pickers led 17-12. Moments later, a superb try to Maitland as Bolton toyed with West until he slipped a neat pass to Christensen. He got it on to Whitby and his lob pass found Chipperfield backing up, and at 21-12 it looked all over. But never count the Rosellas out. Back they came as Price in desperation threw a long ball to Atkins, and he found Greg Price in support and West had hit back. 3 points the difference and West weren't finished. With the clock running out, Price again opened up the Maitland defence. On his inside was Atkins, and looming up was Hooker Bowen, and he beat a path for the posts as the siren was sounding, and the Rosellas were home 24-21.
The lifesaver helicopter was called in at 12 amid growing fears for the safety of 86-year-old Jim Kidd. The elderly man was reported missing from Hillside Nursing Home on Sunday afternoon. It took the helicopter just minutes to spot the man hopelessly hooked up in a barbed wire fence. Ambulance officers took him to John Hunter Hospital, where he remains under observation, apparently none the worse for his ordeal. It's not known how long Mr. Kidd spent trapped in the fence, but evidence of his struggles remain: fragments of clothing and a belt.
Yeah. We searched over there yesterday, and he wasn't there yesterday.
So when you found him, though, he was actually sort of...
He was tied up in a barbed wire.
He was tied up in a barbed wire. Police believe Mr Kidd must have wandered further afield before winding up on the fence near Tennant Road, just a few hundred metres from the nursing home. Residents say conditions over the past few days haven't been good.
It's been shocking here the last couple of days. We've had a fair bit of rain, and as I said, if he's been there since Sunday, he's a lucky man to be alive.
On Sunday, at the Liberals' campaign launch, Premier Nick Greiner announced plans to make LCOM stations compete with each other. The scheme will force stations to make their own deals with businesses and even other states, and according to the Premier, bring down the price of domestic power. But union officials say it's the first step towards privatising LCOM.
It's basically bringing Thatcherism to Australia, because the privatisation is his ultimate aim. Is already been tried in the UK without any success.
Unions say older power stations at Vales Point, Munmora, Liddell and Wallerawang in the state's central west have no hope of competing against newer stations like Bayswater and Araring.
Well, it's impossible for the older power station to compete against the newer power stations, especially with the modern techniques the new power stations have. But it'll put the managers in a position of the older power stations to try and bring down their staffing levels to compete.
Ultimately, unions say hundreds of workers in areas like Cessnock and the Central Coast could lose their jobs.
BHP's SPCC Act licence is renewed every May. This year, however, the document is much thicker and far more comprehensive than previous years.
It specifies in much more detail certain operations and procedures that they have to do now to minimise their impact on the environment.
The SPCC has called on BHP to carry out additional monitoring of water and air emissions. In the past, there has been an understanding only that BHP supplied the SPCC with information, but that has now been formalised in the licence agreement. The Steelworks is also required under the new licence to undertake a 5-year pollution reduction program. The company must install a water spray system immediately to control dust from stockpiles and improve the blast furnace pumping system to stop untreated effluent flowing into the Hunter River. Also, a tar sludge recycling facility must be established. But most importantly, the licence is enforceable. In the past, if BHP polluted, it could not be prosecuted because the licence requirements were unattainable. Is this an achievable and prosecutable licence?
I believe it is, yes.